Namaste and welcome to Bhoom of Bharat with Rama Shivkumar, founder CEO SRK Game Changers, where we bring you a new update each week on GCC. SRK Game Changers is a GCC consulting services organization providing advisory, governance, and setup services across talent, business operation, and workplace solutions. We deliver customized, high performing global delivery capability centers that encourage artificial intelligence and digital innovation. We leverage the expensive skilled talent pool and groom the next generation's leaders of tomorrow. Our tailored workplace solutions build technology as a core foundation. And we have recently set up an artificial lab, and now we are at the edge of also supporting some of our customers with AI in US. Thanks for your encouraging remarks and the feedback on the uniqueness of our podcast and the themes we choose to discuss with our clients. Audience, your feedback has been really very, very valuable for us. And today, based on the feedback, we have yet another very unique theme and our guest. Our theme is India's Global Capable Centers Advantage, Scaling Innovation and Product Reengineering for Global Enterprises. Why global enterprises should bet on GCCs. And we can't feature none other than Gauri Chandra for this, a very seasoned leader who has scaled GCCs, driven multi-million dollar transformation programs, and championed diversity across BFSI and EdTech sectors. And she's been an old friend, and you couldn't do it. I could not have asked more than this. So thank you so much, Gauri, for having you here.
Thank you, Rama. Pleasure to be here.
And Gauri, for the benefit of our audience, if I may request you to introduce yourself.
So I started my career with TCS as a developer, so a coder straight out of college, and I was, we were developing banking software for banks in Switzerland, and I worked on an airline product as well, and that was also for a global, organization. So I think now a lot of services companies are also setting up their GCCs. So, but back then we were just like doing the development, and then I moved on to American Express, which is where we met. And American Express, as everybody knows, is one of the pioneering GCCs, in India. And I've worked in a global delivery model, developing and supporting products that were used by American Express worldwide. And that was more, I would say, kind of on the receiving end, where you've got the sending and the receiving in a typical GCC environment. And then I moved with American Express to the UK. And I would say that is when I was more on the sending end. So I've seen kind of both ends of that spectrum as well. And that was quite interesting. So I was working on some of our digital capabilities as well as compliance programs. And I was working with our teams in India for, again, in the global delivery model. Post that, I moved back to India and worked with JP Morgan Chase, and that was in a governance leadership role. And interestingly, JP Morgan has, or at that time, had 14 technology hubs, and 3 of them were in India. And my role was to make sure that I was managing the 3 India hubs, that they ran in the same way as our technology hubs outside of India. So, again, there was a lot of focus on making sure that, we were measuring the same thing, we were performing at par, we had the same culture, metrics that we were tracking, etc. So, great place to be. And from then on, I moved to Wells Fargo, and there I was managing the end user and collaboration services. Again, direct responsibility for India and Philippines, but in a global delivery role. We did a lot of the engineering as well as the support, including product development. A lot of that. User experience. We were doing that out of India, and then I ran one of our CIOs, one of the critical global programs on our global CIOs agenda I ran that from India. So the reason I'm saying that is you can see the shift of how things have kind of changed from really working more in a support role to really running global programs out of India. And then I moved on to head a GCC out of India, and that was for a British edtech company. So that was again, kind of setting up, optimizing, scaling that GCC. So that was a really good experience. And currently, I'm a partner with Positive Momentum, and I work with different clients in terms of helping them scale, transform, lead. So very interesting role as well. Moving on to the personal side, I'm a very passionate design enthusiast. I have a 20-year-old daughter, so I would say, I'm a very nervous mom, always on edge, and based out of Bangalore.
Mm-hmm. No, no, great to hear that. And, Gauri, a lot of things, kind of resemble, I would say that, every time when I was being asked that, what is the thing you will always like, one thing you would like to redo it or, the learning continues for them, I would say, being a mom.
There's no rule book. There's no rule book that comes with it.
So, I used to say, I'm the first time mother of a 20 years old, 21, 25, and now 30 years old. So that's the kind of, things continue. And so, good thing with you brought about, like your partner with Positive Momentum, you've led RM India, you've done good work with JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, American Express, and various varieties of stuff. How do you see, things evolving now to becoming more as a kind of innovation partners?
I think that's very interesting, and like I just explained, I've worked with GCCs, way back, and continue to work. So I've seen that transformation. I would say earlier it used to be more around the cost arbitrage, or how can we do some of the not so valued or critical tasks out of a different location. So typically you'd have people kind of doing work out of India, which was process documentation or testing, and that's typically how people would start. And that's kind of transformed, or significantly. And what's very interesting is the pace of change, Rama, where it's no longer about cost arbitrage or the low end skills being, or work being done out of India. It's really about how can we do a lot of the innovation, do things that scale, a lot of design and functional ownership that's kind of moving to India. So if I were to say, we were earlier an engine room, we just go tinker away with stuff. And now we're part of the navigation team, we are the ones who are helping figure out also, what needs to be done, what's the business. I mean, you think about it, we've got now 1700 plus GCCs and more coming every day, 2 million people who are working, in the GCCs. If I take the example again of Wells Fargo, it's not just about, doing the support or doing, some of the activities, service management, etc. It's really, how can we have product manager and functional roles out of India? American Express, as we kind of do a lot of the products are co-owned out of India, some of the critical products as well. So, if I look ahead, Rama, I mean, some of the three big things that I see happening is, where how enterprises, what's on the global agenda right now? It's about cybersecurity, AI, blockchain, sustainability, and we are in the thick of it. So I think, this is where a lot of the work that we are doing as GCCs will continue, and will continue to evolve and scale. Secondly, like I mentioned, the product ownership, I think, I mean, even in my previous roles, as well as is a lot of the product ownership is now kind of moving, not, I wouldn't say it's 100% there, but people are definitely thinking about it, global roles being placed out of India. So, if you take the example of, for example, your Microsoft India Development Center, the SAP designing, products, etc. I mean, one of my ex-colleagues just moved to a global role within American Express, leading the entire global thing out of India. So I think that's something that we'll continue to see. And that kind of leads into, how are GCCs becoming the leadership pipeline? Not just within India where we have global roles, but also to say, when we think about, people moving to the US in global roles or to the UK. So I think because there's a lot of depth of talent as well as, the exposure and, uh, our ability to have more of a 360-degree view of what's happening, because there is typically you'd find GCCs in India, there's a lot of co-location that will happen. There'll be centers, with COVID, people did move out to, working from home, but it's now back to at least 3 days a week. So there's a lot of collaboration that also happens. So people get a lot of good exposure in terms of, looking at different departments across. So there's a lot of leadership talent that we are developing that, will then fall into the pipelines of whether it's in the global teams or having global roles in India. So I think, overall, if I were to sum it up, it's no longer about cost efficiency, it's co-creation and, of strategy, of innovation, of product development, you name it.
In fact, I like your idea. We're talking about product engineering, you're talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about AI, and these are, very important stuff and high-end thing that you're talking about when you're doing work out of India. And there's a lot of myth, even when you're looking at mid-sized companies. So, any message specifically to the mid-sized companies that you would like to give when they're looking at India as an innovation center?
So, again, that's a great question. You look at some of the mid-sized companies. Earlier, you had, people like, like companies that we work with, American Express, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, a lot of the big companies that were setting up. And now it's no longer those, I would say big companies. You also have smaller companies as well as mid-scale companies. And I think, if I were to take a few examples, you think about Revolut, in the UK, they set up a GCC in India, and that was really more around compliance, risk, etc. They've doubled their headcount in 2 years, almost 2 years, and they're doing a lot of the, the digital banking innovation and product engineering from here. Look at HubSpot. They started with having, marketing, sales, and support roles out of India, and now very quickly they've, expanded into engineering and product development, because I think people do realize, what, we bring to the table. And, if I were to say, what are those big factors that play? And the first one would be talent. I mean, we talk about it all the time about the depth of talent that we have as well as the breadth. I mean, we've got, almost 1.5 million STEM graduates, every year we churn out. And all this, skills, people have AI, cloud, design, cybersecurity skills. I mean, that's a focus area. You talk to the youngsters today, they want to do all these courses and get on the bandwagon. Sometimes I feel like, I'm trying to chase my tail, trying to learn everything. Second, around speed and flexibility, and there are two aspects to that, I would say. Currently you can set up a GCC in 12 months. You can scale it. I mean, Revolut, like, I mentioned, doubled its headcount in, a little over 2 years. So, the speed and flexibility of being able to set up a GCC. And secondly, in terms of, that whole follow the sun model, where you've got, you can turn around stuff very quickly, given, the time difference, etc. The third thing I would say is, I would, the kind of ecosystem effect. We now have such a strong ecosystem. You have Answers and Zinovs and, all the other consultants of the world who can enable you to set up a GCC and to scale it, to run it, to share best practices. You have NASCOM, doing a whole lot of, great work around it. So I think there's an ecosystem that enables you to get set up, working really quickly, people who can help you accelerate that journey as well. And then lastly, I would say is, something around cultural fluency. And what I mean by that is, today, especially for people who worked in GCC, they work, shoulder to shoulder with their global counterparts. So there is that confidence and, people who are able to talk the same language. And I see that maturing day after day, where people realize what are the key critical skills that are needed to be successful in a GCC environment. So I think all those things really contribute to us being a very, very attractive GCC location. And that's what I would, that's my message to the mid-sized companies, etc. It's no longer about coming here for cost. It's really coming here for the talent, for the speed, and flexibility of turning around stuff, and really having people who understand what it takes to work and thrive in that environment. So, I think, it's like you get those Silicon Valley skills, you get them, at a speed and a scale which is can't be matched.
No, no, thank you so much that you really mentioned about, time to market, the kind of scale, of work what you could do, and the kind of talent that you could get that here. And I think it will be good for me to also ask you at this point of time that keep hearing that you've done a lot of good work with RM India in terms of the efficiencies which was built up, brought about during your tenure. Anything specific from a leadership, skills, or you want to share with our audience that we should do differently, which helped you to kind of get to this level?
So, if I were to say, when it comes to, anybody who's kind of taken on a role like that, the first thing is you really need to understand the lay of the land. You need to understand, who are your key stakeholders, what's really happening on the ground, where, understand the processes, understand the scope of delivery, and then look at, what is it that you can do to optimize. Because I think ultimately we don't have to work in, we've been doing things in a certain way, we need to continue doing that. So it's really about understanding the status quo, have a plan as to how you can, optimize, rationalize, make things more efficient. But then that's just to get that engine working properly. And then you really need to think about, how is it that you can innovate? How can you, really partner better? So how do you build that culture of innovation, of curiosity, of, being able to really do the value add? So from a leadership perspective, this is what, I used to keep telling my team as well is, stay curious, just, understand what's really happening, within your process, outside of your process, and in the industry. So stay curious, keep learning. And the one very big thing that I think, is understand the business. Because unless you understand the business, you really can't come up with, uh, either innovative solutions, or really, even from an impact or delivery perspective, how would you, because, there are times when you're doing, a part of, a bigger, process. Now how do you understand what you're doing, how does it impact the big picture? So I think understanding the business is really critical. And then the other thing is, and then lastly, it would be more around, I would say, communication, relationship, the softer skills of things, whether it's leading your team or working with your stakeholders, in the mothership. You need to be able to, uh, communicate effectively, build that relationship. Because, and which is where, kind of on a tangent, I would say, AI can do a lot of stuff, it can't help you with relationships. That is something that, the humans need to do to be able to really form those networks. So I would say, I mean, there's a lot more I can talk about, Rama, but those are the three top things.
Yeah. No, that's is.
And I can
Uh,
talk about innovation as well, but yeah.
Yeah, no, no, that's a good part. Relationship, it's very, very important. It's very important to be curious. And, I had always kind of, looked up to you, Gauri. And I've always seen you a very passionate reader and a very quiet and this thing person. But,
Well, I don't think, Rama, if you would ask people, they'd call me quieter than now.
that was my next question to you. That I've seen you worked on a lot of different diversity programs, which is there where they're calling about in terms of the variety of roles, the variety, the there, and then the diversity also in terms of the gender and things that you worked. So how do you see that differently?
So, the example I would take, Rama, is, we have an orchestra going, and we've only got violins in the orchestra. How do you think that will sound? So we need to have a lot more of the trumpet, the guitars, and the drums and everything. And that's how I really view diversity, to say that you need that diverse thought process, the diverse ethos, the culture, just the human dynamics, to be able to really have that music to the ears, or that orchestra going. So it's no longer, and well, in certain organizations, diversity is just a number that's reported on an HR tracker. And to me, that's not, we're doing ourselves a disservice, by doing that. And there's enough research and more to say that if you have diversity at the table, how it actually impacts your business outcomes as well, your bottom line. So I won't get into that, but we really need to think about the diversity and the inclusion part of it. So having people be at the table is one thing, but then how do you make sure that they're being heard? So that, to me, that's also what's important. I mean, if I were to take a few examples, I mean, we did a lot of diversity programs at RM, and even in my earlier companies, I kind of started the Women in Technology Forum at Wells Fargo. And, and having people there, but then join that. But what's also very important, and I'm sure you'll resonate with it, you and I know what it takes for a woman to be successful, but we want our other, folks to know. So, how do you get allies to join up? People who are really advocating for us. So, so there is a culture shift that's needed. And you need to have a lot more of the education. Don't just get into the numbers game. Address things like unconscious bias, etc. So I mean, I know I can talk about it all day around what we need to do and how we need to do things differently. But if I were to kind of sum it up, is how do you build that diverse team at every level? Typically what you'd find is you've got right now, if you look at engineering graduates, you've got 45% of women coming out of colleges, people coming out of colleges, 45% of them are women. But then we lose them as we go along the pyramid. So how do we have diversity at every level? And I'm not just talking about women, since we are both talking, so we're talking a little bit more about women. How do we make sure that inclusion in decision making, what I talked about is have people at the table, have them be heard,
Yeah.
have
No,
them
no,
be
no.
involved in the decision
No,
making,
that's a good point.
and then really and link your DNI, agenda to business outcomes. So how do we make sure that it's not just a feel good? Sorry, I know the camera will now move. It's not just a feel good thing, but it's really about customer success metrics. And a lot of companies are doing that really well now. I know American Express, and you and I were both there. There was a lot of good work happening, and they've now got inclusion councils, etc., where they really encourage people or diverse voices to be heard, and being valued. Similarly at RM, at Wells Fargo, at JP Morgan Chase, there's a lot of good work happening. um, I know companies who are doing a lot of work around neurodiversity, as well as people with differently abled. So I think a lot more needs to happen, absolutely. But how do we also like design products for, so unless you have somebody who's coming in with that diverse viewpoint, your product will only look a certain way. So I think those are critical things, I would say, Rama, in terms of, and I know you're equally passionate to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I would like to also hear your thoughts upon it, Gauri, that if you could launch one national mentorship initiative from a GCC Innovation Lab to empower women and underrepresented groups in tech across India by 2047, what would that be and why?
So, again, going back and linking it back to the previous thing that we talked about, is, how do we make sure that there's enough diversity or different, women at, that senior level? So I would say, it's something like, how do you kind of move to a boardroom position? So, it's like, we could call it pathway to, boardroom, or bridge to boardroom, a program like that. And I think, because, we have a lot of women who kind of, start, graduate from, STEM field, but we lose them along the way. And I think to be able to do that, in a program like this, I think we need to have, and these are things that need to happen at not just an organization level, or even, well, in some organization things happen only at a team level, but we really need to go to a national level, I would say, where we have, mentorship pods, where it is, through the, you mentioned the GCC Innovation Lab, where you have technologists, who are kind of working across maybe even cities, have more representation from tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. And it's more at a national level. It's no longer at, just a team or an organization level, etc. The other thing is, how can we really encourage, uh, education, or innovation? So can we offer things like, innovation fellowships, etc., and have cross representation? So for example, can we incentivize companies to take on, people, or students, from different, whether it's colleges or, other tier 2, tier 3 cities, and have them do internships or fellowships across, and then really have a leadership acceleration program. And that's something that can be done, at an organizational level, or even at, I don't know, thinking out loud. Can we do it at a city level or a state level? Some sort of program, so that's, accelerated. So have those role models also then be represented, so, people can, because, you know and I've mentored a whole lot of women, and, done coaching, sessions, Rama. And, it's very surprising. I think you and I probably may not resonate with it that much now, but, there are women who are like, how do I do this? How do I struggle? I struggle with, whether it's, taking care of my family, or, just education and things like that. And these are real stories, they're heartbreaking when you hear it. And these are people who are working in probably some of the good companies as well, and still struggling. So how do we have role models there? And we publish more stories around role models to say, see, these people have done it. You can do it too. Hang in there. So yeah, I would say, bridge to boardroom. How do we accelerate that direction and show them, the path to the boardroom? That would be my program.
No, thank you so much, Gauri. It was really very insightful. Just last thing, if India GCC growth story was a movie, what would its title be? Just on the
Oh,
like.
that's a easy one. From back office to blockbuster.
That's very good one.
It has to be a blockbuster. Maybe not even like, these days it's like 1,000 crores. It'd probably be, I don't know, what's the, I think it's, 20 by 2030 is going to be God knows how many billion revenue. That kind of blockbuster.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I think, Gauri, a lot of discussions about, what GCCs could do from a product engineering, cybersecurity, AI. I think today our audience learned a lot from having a discussion. We're running out of time, but I'm feeling it very distinct that, we'll have some more time in our side to do the discussion. Maybe we will definitely have a follow-up discussion on this. So thank you so much for this once again, Gauri.
Thank you for having me,
Yeah, yeah.
Rama. Been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
and for the audience, thank you so much for tuning in to this special episode of Bhoom of Bharat. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights on the ideas and innovation shaping our world. If you have any thoughts or stories to share on this topic, we would love to hear from you. You could connect with me on LinkedIn, SRK Game Changers, or drop your questions on our website, srkgamechangers.com. Until next time, namaste from Bhoom of Bharat.